From the initial idea, the first discussion that we had, kind of coming up with the idea for the setting and the story, till now is about 6 years. A lot of that was kind of writing, developing. We spent ages just writing the film and doing loads of versions of those. The production itself was 2 years.
It's kind of a combination between when we were making our previous short, Oh Willie, it's set in a nudist colony, and sometimes we were asking ourselves, should we have a black nudist or not? And it was kind of one of the conversations we had. And a lot of times when we were doing things like adverts, we're trying to cast black people in the adverts, and sometimes that generates a discussion with the ad agency. So it was this thing that we were thinking about. And of course, our country where we're from, Belgium, has a very interesting colonial history that's not talked about very often at all. So when we started doing a bit of research into our country's history, we realized how much we actually didn't know about it and how much is swept under the rug all the time. Generally, we're attracted to these kind of subjects that have attention in it. The same with the nudity, the difficulty to depict it. We thought this was also a very kind of tense and ambiguous subject that would be interesting to talk about in a very interesting setting. When people go to these colonies, who is it that go there? What are their intentions and how do they behave once they get there? We thought it was an interesting setting.
We constantly do research, so everything is based on archive footage, photos. We're reading a lot of diaries written by people, missionaries back then. There's a scene where all these kind of porters like plummet down from this bridge. Those are things that actually happened. And the fact that they were all chained together. So when you read it in the diaries, they don't consider it a tragedy. They consider it more like an annoyance that they lost so much cargo. And we always thought that this is a very strange kind of way of dealing with the fact that so many people have just died. It's kind of absurd. So this absurd sort of atmosphere and this idea that these people going to these colonies, they didn't have any kind of moral boundaries. There was no one to police them. They could just kind of do whatever they wanted, and it just creates this kind of weird, almost like a playground for them. They considered it as a playground, and it's so absurd that it's this kind of this dark humor that we were like interested in tackling. Well, doing research now, you can kind of see, well, we're surrounded by all this wealth, especially in Belgium. Like a lot of the train stations, just about any beautiful building you see in Belgium has been financed kind of more or less directly by the rubber trade in the Congo at the time. And it doesn't take long to make a couple more steps, like, okay, everything, like our clothes, the fact that our clothes are so cheap, the fact that our technology is so cheap, someone's making those and someone's getting ripped off, someone's being exploited. So there is like a ripple effect that you can kind of feel coming from like this kind of colonial systems that were in place. But it does make for an interesting subject matter to tackle, and I think the way we do it with this kind of absurdist humor is a way of kind of confronting the audience. The audience laughs and then they kind of feel uncomfortable about laughing, and it's kind of an interesting tension to kind of create in the spectator.
Where our main challenge to ourselves was to incorporate dialogue, because we thought we can't really do a longer form film if we don't have dialogue, because it will be too hermetic, too closed up. And it just became, because of these dialogues, actually we only recorded them during the shoot, not in the storyboarding phase, not in the animatic phase, and it really bloated the film out. We always had like about 6 shots, champ contre champ, of a character speaking to each other, that turned into 30 shots, champ contre champ, because we liked these dialogues and we liked what the actors were doing.
We didn't have a script. We storyboarded quite a lot. I mean, first of all, the film was going to be very different in style. It was going to be far more fragmentary and far less narrative, there's no recognizable characters. So we had a lot of ideas for like kind of settings, which is where this kind of anthology structure comes into being. But we were kind of, after a while, we were missing like characters, we were missing like a storyline. So we developed those, and it was very incremental. We like kind of, I think we did hundreds of storyboards, like draft after draft, and sometimes like a year later we'd like sort of go through all our old storyboards and say like, that's actually a pretty good idea, should get that back in. So there were a lot of kind of different versions floating around, and a lot got cut and then got put back in, and there was never really like a script that was like the film.
It exists now, but it's made based on the storyboards to give to film funds that supported the film. It's not really a working document. We tried to have very visual storytelling, so it's kind of hard to make that by writing. We prefer it by sketching and by making characters, by making puppets. Already in a very early stage, just having their faces there to look at you, and you kind of interact with them, you start imagining their character because you're looking at these puppets that already exist. We shot in one stage, and we were shooting on 4 sets. And there was only one version of every character, so it was a big puzzle for the first assistants to make it all happen. So basically on every set there was the hotel is here, and then the jungle is there. We always had to change the settings a lot to make optimal use of the puppets that we had. We had about 8 puppet and set builders. So we started out in France, it's a co-production between France, Belgium and Holland, and all the French money we used to make puppets and sets. And there's a team of about 10 people. We have an art director, people making puppets, people making sets there. And of course, while that's happening, we're also like helping ourselves to get the most out of the budget. And then when we're in Belgium, the crew is quite small. We have 2 animators. They're working on 2 of the sets while we're setting up the set ourselves. Marc is doing the light. I'm building the sets, so we're kind of creating the images, and then the animators, once it's ready, can come and animate on our sets. And the first assistant doing the planning. We try to keep the crew quite small because it allows us to have a freedom and it allows us to have time to work on things. We think it's a little bit too small. Maybe in the future we want to expand it a little bit, but you always want to keep that balance. I think if you start expanding production too much, you start having to compromise too much, you start being rushed, and it's also a problem.
Yeah, we use very kind of naturalistic cinematography in the film because I mean it's a puppet film, it's a stop motion film. It's to use a stylized lighting in a stylized setting wouldn't have that kind of same tension. So when we're setting up a shot, we always kind of imagine like there's actually like a puppet film crew. So all the framing will be done as if their tripod is like so high. There will always only be one source of light from the sun, and that would just be a big light. So the lighting is very naturalistic, and we try and get that. That's something that's very important because we think it just kind of makes for an interesting look.